At 62, Johnny Depp finally admits why he divorced Vanessa Paradis. He said just one word to describe her. That word was bliss. That's how 62-year-old Johnny Depp described his 14 years with Vanessa Paradis when a reporter caught him in Tokyo last November. But in a 2013 email that a jury later read out in a Virginia courtroom, that same man called that same woman a French extortionist and something far uglier. So which one is real? Because 9 days ago in Paris, Vanessa did something nobody saw coming. And if you line up what Depp's been admitting at 62, the reason he lost her isn't a mystery anymore. Start with what he said in Tokyo. Depp was sitting in front of an AFP reporter last November, promoting an art show of his own paintings, when the questions turned to Vanessa. He didn't dodge, he didn't smirk, he didn't crack a joke. Depp just said it flat, in one word, that his life with Vanessa Paradis was bliss. Then Depp pointed at the name of the album Vanessa put out during those exact years, and that album name was also the word bliss, which meant he'd said the word twice, on purpose, on the record. Think for a second about who's saying it. This is a guy who got publicly humiliated on 2 continents. He got called a wife-beater by a British judge in 2020, later cleared by an American jury in 2022. Depp lost his role as Captain Jack Sparrow, the character that made him a billion-dollar face. Then he rented a place in the English countryside and basically vanished from Hollywood. And the one word he chose at 62 to describe the 14 years before all of that mess started was bliss. That single word is the setup for everything that comes next. Because at 62, Depp's telling a different story about his own life than he used to tell. He's dropping receipts in interviews that seem to be about something else. And once you line up what he said in the last 6 months against what he said in that Virginia courtroom, the reason he lost her stops being a mystery at all. Rewind to a hotel lobby in Paris back in 1998. The place was the Costes, a small fancy hotel tucked in the first arrondissement. Depp was 35, freshly single after his split from British supermodel Kate Moss. He was in France to shoot Roman Polanski's supernatural thriller, The Ninth Gate. Vanessa was 25, and she was already a French national treasure. She'd been famous since 14, when a little song called Joe Le Taxi went to #1 across Europe. She was a Chanel face. Karl Lagerfeld put her on his campaigns. Serge Gainsbourg, the most talked-about songwriter in French history, was writing tracks for her when she was 15. She dated Lenny Kravitz for 5 years, and by every measure she was French royalty. Vanessa also wasn't looking for another rock star, because she'd tried that once already, and it hadn't gone great. But that night, she was in the lobby of the Costes when Depp walked in, and here's the story he told the Daily Mail years later. He saw her from behind first, a dress with an exposed back. He saw the back and the neck, and, in his own words, she turned around and, boom, his life as a single man was over. Vanessa's own version of the same moment, told to the London Times, was just as clean. She said she loved him before she was with him. He shook her hand at that hotel, and she thought, in her words, okay, that's it. To Vanessa, Depp didn't just look good, and there was no one better. All of that happened back in 1998, and she'd have plenty of time to change her mind about him. Then came the years in Provence. 1 year after that lobby meeting, in May of 1999, their daughter Lily Rose was born in a suburb of Paris. 3 years later, in April of 2002, their son Jack arrived. Depp told OK magazine in 2004 that fatherhood had turned him into, quote, the perfect example of all the paternity cliches he'd laughed at for years. He said he'd have 100 kids if Vanessa were willing. This is a man who built his whole career playing weird, damaged outsiders like Edward Scissorhands and Sweeney Todd. Off-screen in France, he'd become something totally different. He was Papa, in French, on purpose. The family lived in a village called Plan de la Tour, in a farmhouse Depp is said to have bought for $4 million, later dumping millions more into restoring it. Stone walls, a pool tucked in the garden, vineyards a short walk away. Vanessa spoke French to the kids, and Depp spoke English, so they grew up bilingual. Nobody could quite find the village on a map, which was the whole point. The paparazzi mostly gave up. Depp told the French magazine VSD that France had given him everything. In his own words, France gave him a marvelous family and an equilibrium he'd missed enormously. That word equilibrium really matters here. He's about to lose it entirely, and he'll spend the next 14 years chasing it in every wrong direction possible. Before we get to the wrong directions, though, there's the boat, because that boat is going to come back later in this story and hit you square in the chest. He even bought a yacht he named Vajoliroja. In 2007, Depp bought a 156-foot luxury yacht. He then spent over $7 million, according to reports, refitting the whole thing into a pirate-themed floating palace. Crushed velvet, silk, antiques, gold-plated everything. The interior looked like Edward Scissorhands had crashed a Wes Anderson movie, and he gave the boat a name almost nobody could pronounce, and everybody misheard. A name that sounded like Vajoliroja. The name was actually an anagram of the whole family. V.A. for Vanessa, J.O. for Johnny, L.I.R.O. for Lily Rose, J.A. for Jack. The whole family, spelled out on the side of a $30 million yacht, which tells you how deep in he really was. Depp wasn't just playing pirate on screen. He was living inside a family-themed fantasy version of pirate off-screen. Depp was sailing his own kids around the Bahamas on a boat named after them. There was even a private island in the Caribbean the family used. Between the French village, the Bahamas island, and their L.A. compound, they had homes on 3 continents. This wasn't just love. It was a whole life setup. He'd built an actual empire around Vanessa and those kids, and every single piece of it had her name on it somewhere. That's the version of Depp fans still remember. It's also the version he still misses out loud. And that's the version he was about to burn down, one shower scene at a time, starting in 2009 on a movie set in Puerto Rico, which is where this story turns from a fairy tale into something else entirely. Everything changes on a movie set in Puerto Rico in 2009. The movie was The Rum Diary, a passion project Depp had been trying to get made for years, based on a Hunter Thompson novel. Depp played a burned-out journalist named Paul Kemp, and the female lead was a 23-year-old actress named Amber Heard. She played Chanot, the fiancée of another man, who becomes Kemp's love interest. There was a scene in the script where the 2 characters kiss in a shower. That scene became the moment. Depp told a jury in Virginia in April of 2022, under oath, exactly what happened. His words were, quote, "During the scene in the shower where we kissed, I felt something I shouldn't have, because at that time she had her partner and I had Vanessa. It all started with that kiss in the shower." Later the same day, according to Depp's own testimony, Amber came into his trailer. They shared a glass of wine, and, again in his own words, kisses. That wasn't just one kiss. It was several kisses in his trailer on the same day as the shower scene. All of it in 2009. He was still with Vanessa back home in France. Their son Jack was 7. Their daughter, Lily Rose, was 10. and Vanessa was 6,000 miles away doing a music tour, believing every word of the life she thought they still had. Hold on to that timeline, because it's about to matter for the rest of this video. Depp knew in 2009, and he didn't confess. Not in 2009, not in 2012 when the split was announced, not in 2016, not in 2020. The only time he ever confessed was under oath in 2022, 13 years later, on a witness stand in Virginia, because a lawyer forced it out of him. That was the receipt. By May of 2012, Depp was on a red carpet in London, and he lied. The event was the Dark Shadows premiere right in the middle of London. A British reporter from The Sun walked up to Depp and asked, point blank, if the split rumors were true. Depp lied on camera. He looked the reporter in the eye and said the rumors weren't true, that they weren't absolutely true. Weeks later, on June 19th of 2012, Depp's publicist Robin Baum sent a two-line statement to Entertainment Tonight. Johnny Depp and Vanessa Paradis, the statement said, had amicably separated. Please respect their privacy. That was the whole announcement. 14 years, 2 kids, one of the most photographed couples in the world, ended in 23 words. And here's the detail that makes it worse. Vanessa hadn't walked a red carpet with him in 18 months before that announcement. She'd been slowly disappearing from his public life for a year and a half, and he was still telling reporters the rumors weren't true. The lie was doing overtime by the time it finally got officially killed. Now remember the fact from the very beginning of this video, the one most people never bother to mention. They were never married. So all of this, the split, the fallout, the villas, the millions, the yacht, none of it involved a courtroom. There was no divorce settlement, no prenup, and no legal custody battle. It was just 2 adults with a private empire and 2 kids in the middle trying to unwind the whole thing quietly in France. The real question hanging over the whole story was why? Why did it really end? The public wanted a reason, and Depp gave them almost nothing for over a decade. He talked around it in every single interview. The blame moved everywhere. He blamed distance. He blamed schedules. He blamed the racket of Hollywood. He blamed the touring lives of 2 working artists with 2 kids in the middle. But he never once, in 14 years of interviews, gave a straight answer to the direct question, which was the whole point of doing it that way. He'd learned, very carefully, to talk around it, and Vanessa did the exact same thing on her side. Neither of them ever gave the press the neat, tidy soundbite everyone was chasing. That silence created its own myth. Whole tabloid careers got built out of guessing what really broke them up. Was it Amber? Was it drugs? Was it fame? Or was it Vanessa herself, who a few sources whispered was, quote, unhappy for years? Every theory got printed, and Depp neither confirmed nor denied any of them. He just kept working, kept moving, kept drinking. But there were pieces of the real story hidden inside interviews he'd been giving all along. You had to line them up to see them, and the first big piece he dropped was in a Rolling Stone profile in 2013, back when he probably thought nobody would ever stitch the whole timeline together. He was wrong about that. The full timeline is right there in his own words, and once you connect the pieces, the answer stops being complicated at all. His first version of the story came in a 2013 Rolling Stone piece. The magazine asked Depp directly about the split, and here's the answer he gave. Quote, the last couple of years have been a bit bumpy at times, certainly unpleasant. That's the nature of breakups, especially when there are kiddies involved. That was the polite version, and he softened it even further. Quote, relationships are very difficult, especially in the racket I'm in, because you're constantly away or they're away. And so, it's hard. It wasn't easy on her. It wasn't easy on me. It wasn't easy on the kids. That version stuck for almost a decade. 2 touring artists, 2 kids stuck in the middle. Everything vaguely bumpy and never really explained. That was the whole story. But inside that same interview, Depp let something slip fans would only understand years later. He talked about the breakup as a moment when he could have leaned on alcohol to cushion it, and he insisted he hadn't. Quote, in terms of the breakup, I definitely wasn't going to rely on the drink to ease things or cushion the blow, which sounded fine at the time. However, a 2020 court file in London, under oath, would tell a very different story about how much he was already drinking during the last years of the Vanessa relationship. In that trial, he said, in his own words, I was abusing alcohol for sure. That's the sworn version, and it flatly contradicted the smooth version he'd given Rolling Stone 7 years earlier, which brings the story straight to Vanessa's side of that same window. Meanwhile, Vanessa dropped her own quiet answer in Harper's Bazaar. Right after the split, Vanessa gave Harper's Bazaar an interview most fans read past. But if you slow it down, she was saying everything. Her exact words, quote, nothing is ever for sure, but when something in love doesn't work from the beginning, it's never going to work. Then came the advice, quote, don't push it. Sometimes you could be in an unhappy relationship. You're very much in love with someone, but it's making you unhappy, and you think things can change and you can work it out. Let me read that whole thing back to you because it matters. She's describing her 14 years with Johnny Depp. Between the lines, she's saying she stayed years past the point she should have, and she's admitting she was unhappy for a long time. She tried to fix it, and eventually she couldn't. She said all of it in soft French politeness, and most of the world barely noticed what she'd actually confessed. That's the pattern with these two. Neither of them ever dropped one giant bomb about the split. They dropped tiny, careful sentences over a decade, and those sentences only made sense once you laid them side by side. Side by side, the picture is very clear. He was drinking heavily. He'd fallen for a young co-star in a shower scene in 2009. Vanessa knew, or knew enough to feel it, and she stayed too long trying to hold something together that was already gone. But even that isn't the ugliest part of the story, because the ugliest part shows up in 2022 when Depp's private emails start getting read out loud in a courtroom in Virginia. Now, jump to a Virginia courtroom in 2022, where the emails got ugly. The lawyer's name was Ben Rottenborn. He was representing Amber Heard, and he stood up and started reading Depp's private emails and texts into the record. One of them stopped the whole room. It was addressed to Elton John. In it,